This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
If you or somebody you know has a child that has ADHD or is struggling with some learning challenges, she is in your corner. She is an ADHD coach, a master IEP coach, and has so much insight. She's been doing this for many years. She personally walked this journey, and now she's giving back in terms of helping parents move things forward and get the advocacy they need for their children. We're going to take a look at one of the parents that she's currently working with and how that is going. And it's so great to have her back with us. Karen Lowry is on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. We've never really looked at specifically somebody you've worked with, and this is all anonymous, but I'd love to hear how the situation has gone from the beginning and how you support and where we're at now. Can you share one with us?
Sure. So ahead of that, I just want to say I'm always talking about school communication, home and school, parents communicating with the school, despite the fact that you may have a support platform in place, whether it be a 504 or an IEP. And as Steve said, I've lived this journey and I'm very passionate about it. And that's why, and I have to say, and I think I've said in the past, but I'm so proud of him. My 29-year-old has had his ups and downs, and I have been in his corner forever, I feel like. And I've done everything that I've talked about, and he's now a pilot, imagine.
Wow.
And it still shocks me that he can. This is a kid with significant ADHD. But I just want to give those who are listening some positivity, because these kids, although they struggle in school because they just operate in a different kind of way, and unless the school can allow for that and support that, they're not successful. And so this example that I'm going to talk about kind of proves what I'm talking about as far as communication. So this is a new client that has reached out through a referral, and this is about a little boy who's 9 years old, third grade, who is autistic, high functioning, and apparently in a self-contained classroom with 5 other kids, which to me is always a red flag, because that could be an environment that's not least restrictive. And that's what, they're mandated to provide, least restrictive. So he's been in that class for 4 years with an IEP. The mom went to an IEP meeting, and nothing is showing that goals are being met. The school finally admitted that he's not learning. Imagine, he's not learning. And she apparently flipped out, and she's threatening a lawyer, advocate, everything, throwing everything at the wall. And of course, they're now getting concerned, especially when you hear those words. Nobody wants to have a fight with an advocate or a lawyer. And so that's where I come in.
Wow. All right. Can we, before we go any further, just so we understand the lay of the land, he's been in this classroom with a few other students. Why is that a good thing, or why is that a bad thing? Help us better understand.
So I'm still at the cusp of learning the whole situation.
Okay.
And I've laid out questions that I have. And actually, I spoke to the grandfather, and now I need to speak to the mom next week about more details that she has. But a self-contained classroom is not an inclusive classroom. So the fact that he's not learning, you don't know what the scenario is. Is this 5 kids with outrageous behaviors and there is no learning going on? That could be it. The grandfather told me that the teacher quit and couldn't handle it, and there's a new sub in place.
Okay, so that this is almost like a CSI investigation.
Exactly.
When all these pieces, because what you just said about the scenario, seems like there could be a lot of disruptions, and they felt that they needed to segregate these students here just because, what they're dealing with. But my tip off here is in the family you're dealing with, that student, you said the words high functioning. So he may be good to go in terms of absorbing, learning in the right environment, but he's been placed with others that maybe aren't compatible with his abilities at this time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's so many issues at play right now. I feel like there's so much to learn for people who are listening to me. First of all, if he has autism and he usually many times kids with autism have ADHD. So I think that grandfather said he does. So some of the problem is dealing with behavior, and not to say that every school is like this, but I've seen it happen where it's just easier to put a kid aside in another room and call this kid, a kid that can't regulate emotion. I've seen that with a different client too, whose mom was told that this kid needs to be in this kind of a self-contained, a little bit different, but an emotional regulation class. And I told her, don't let that happen. He's extremely capable of being included. And she did, and was disappointed. So I'm going off on another tangent, of course, but in another example, she ended up pulling him out, and he's doing great. So in this case, the family now is threatening, right? And the grandfather's talking about taking them to court. He's talking about taking his kid out of there and to a very high tuition, putting him in a school for kids with autism. So I think we have to take this slow. And my first comment to parents is never, ever let this happen. You can't have an IEP meeting once a year and think everything's fine. And that's appearing to me what happened. 4 years with an IEP and he's not learning. They finally admit that. Why is that happening? So I think that communication piece was not there. And remember too, every child is mandated to have a test every 3 years. Most likely he has not been retested, which means that we don't know what's going on with him. They just generally say he's not learning. I don't even know what that means. But if he's not been tested, we don't know what the issues are. We don't know if the goals in the IEP are correct or not. So it's a useless IEP pretty much. He was given an IEP and thrown in a class with a bunch of kids. We don't know what's going on. And if you're not following it, this is the thing that happens. 4 years of not learning. And most of us know that by 3rd grade, you shouldn't be learning to read. You should be reading to learn. So that's the situation. And that's one point I want to drive home. Please always realize that once you have that learning platform in place, that's only half the battle. It's the level of communication, the collection of data to be sure that things are working the way they need to be working. And to now get angry and want to stomp to court with a lawyer, I also advised against that as well. I think that the lawyer wanted, him to have me and the lawyer come to court. And my feeling in that case too, for anyone out there who's thinking about it is, yes, it kind of makes you angry that a school let this happen, but at the same time, they know better. And now that you can hold their feet to the fire, why not start over and not trump to court with a lawyer and make this a negative situation? My suggestion is to go to the IEP meeting and start over and find out what's going on, find out if he needs testing, and evaluate the IEP to the best we can currently, find out what he's been receiving and what the results are. And really, I think even if you have to go to court, and some people do, that actually gathers the data you need to go to court. It's not that easy for a judge to side with the plaintiff. I looked into it myself long ago. And I was told by a lawyer in those days, and John's 29, just be careful because judges will side with the school. Now, remember, judges don't have a background in education necessarily. They don't know the meaning of IEPs and 504s. They know that the schools are supposed to function in the way they function. And so it's just not an immediate fix to just say, well, I'm just going to go to court. I think that it's really important to step back and start collecting data and figure out like how egregious is this, and what can we do to make things correct, with the school and with this child.
Do you feel, Karen, that, and it's challenging, I know, to try and pull your emotion out of it, because right away your kid's been done wrong, you're seeing a history of that, we're going to court, and I get it. You want to fly it up the flagpole as strong and as soon as possible, but do you think that we need to tap the brakes on our emotions in this situation and be a little more strategic? And like you said, all right, let's start fresh, this IEP, and if it's going to go down a legal road, like you said, you just collected more evidence, and for the court, I tried again. You can tell them I tried again, and this is where we're at. And I had my son evaluated, my child evaluated again, and they're still struggling. Do you think that that's the best route to take?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
And again, I've been there, to not be emotional. But being emotional and being demanding without data is not getting you anywhere. And I think that that's why it is important to reach out to someone who can help you and go through this process logically. I mean, it is very upsetting that, all those years would go by and finally be told in an IEP meeting, your child's not learning. I don't know what prefaced that. I don't know. She might have brought some data to that meeting and she was upset and they admitted that. But I mean, you can't go a whole year, and in this case, I guess 4 years, without communicating and without being aware of what your child is receiving in the school day. And that's the part that's extremely upsetting. And that's the part that parents should not allow to happen. They do. And I'm not saying the parent's wrong. I'm just saying sometimes parents don't think about the fact that they have that right. And sometimes I think parents are thinking, I don't really know what to do. And I'm assuming that the school does. They're the professionals. They told me
Yes.
this is where he belongs. I'm going to believe him. We've got an IEP in place. What more can I do? And what I'm saying is, you really have to be on it because you don't know what's going on. It concerns me that there would be a teacher that stomped out of there, from what I'm being told, and left because there was such an overwhelm. And I'm not sure that legally they have the right to have, the one teacher for whatever, how many kids, 5 or 6 kids, with all of those with IEPs and behavioral issues possibly as well. And that's where another failure is, when you have a kid with autism and or ADHD and they have some behaviors, they should have a behavior plan in place too. It's not fair for that child who can't regulate, can't organize, can't transition, to not have anything in place to make them successful, right? So if all of them are in that situation, it's a pretty negative situation, I'm afraid. And I know of the district because I used to live near that district in New Jersey and
Mm.
raise my kids there. And this is this is a okay district. There's no reason why anything like this should be happening. But it is. It is. And that's why it's so important for, if things are starting to fall apart, it's important for parents to realize that your child best. And you do have the right to ask questions. You do have the right to call IEP meetings and follow through and find out if the goals in place are being achieved. And in this case, apparently they're not. And I was asked if, the next move would be an IEP meeting, with the lawyer. And I said, no, I would not accept a lawyer in an IEP meeting. And that's because, again, it gets to be very negative, defensive. The school brings in their lawyer as well. And if you want to, and it's not that I'm trying to play nice. It's also, if you do it the right way. Well, in fact, if you go to court, you don't know how many weeks and weeks are going to go by before you make anything work, right? So in the meantime, your kid doesn't have anything. At least if you start with the school and you tell them, what you need and what your rights are and your concerns about what's going on, and you don't involve the legal system, you perhaps have a better way of setting things up the right
Sure.
way,
Mm.
hopefully.
You said something that really resonates, and that is we assume that they know what they're doing. This is what you do. This is the school district. These are educators. They've been trained and they have degrees and on and on and on. And I equate it to even the medical community where, somebody walks in with a white lab coat and a stethoscope. You just, well, they know what they're doing. Not necessarily. You really need to question pretty much everything if you're going to be an advocate for yourself medically or even for your child educationally. What else can you, in your situation, what's the next step in dealing with this? Yeah, you said you're going to talk with the mom. You've been talking with the grandfather. What's next there?
Well, before that, I would say you're right. And remember, in all of these professions, not everyone is going to, do the right thing.
Right.
So you can't just assume that. Um, as far as next steps, I think the next steps really, again, is communication with school and a meeting that, and here we are, right? We're in April now. This is the time that IEP meetings are occurring. She just had this a couple weeks ago. But again, parents have the right to call an IEP meeting. They apparently offered her, out of being upset, ABA therapy 2 to 3 hours a day. And that's just, you don't even know if your child needs it. It takes away academic time. So it was just like, here, have a bone. We're really good after all. So that would have to be really talked about too. So I think the next step is just communication with the school and also making sure that the time frame of the 3-year testing is in place. I don't know when the last time he was tested, but if he's had an IEP for 4 years, then I would think he would have been tested last year. And so far, I don't know that for a fact, because that can make a big difference too. It may show, worsening skills. Who knows? Or it may show, more definitive things that can be worked on and placed in a IEP. So that's my suggestion. I think it's absolutely imperative that there's an immediate meeting, before we get into May and, comments are made that there's no more time. They have to have that time. And if the testing is necessary, which is also a huge priority, that needs to be set up immediately, because depending on the states, it's they have either a 60 or a 90-day time span during which they can provide the testing and schedule an IEP eligibility meeting. So you see how much time can go by. So in this case, you would want to make sure that if he does need testing to revise an IEP, that it gets done immediately so that by September, he hits the ground running.
Wow. How often should an IEP be done? The testing for it. I'm sorry, the testing.
The testing, minimally, that's usually every 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes it's waived, just depending on the child and the needs, that kind of a thing. I would think in this case, especially since he was so young when he first got his IEP, this should have not been waived at all, because maybe he had it in first grade. Maybe he should have it this year. I don't know. I'm not sure what the time frame is on that. So as you can see, I'm still kind of at the beginning of this whole journey with them.
You're
now.
On your fact-finding mission. You gotta. It's a puzzle. You're gathering all the pieces so you can put them together and then present a work of art in terms of moving this student forward. I remember a few years ago, I had a conversation with someone. We're talking about our kids, and they were talking about a test that you pay for, but it reveals a lot. Now, many of us don't want to take on that expense. I forget what it was. I don't think it was like super expensive. I want to say $300, $500, somewhere in there. And this is, I want to say about 4 years ago, somewhere around there. What could you do if you wanted to take it on yourself to get further evaluation of your child? What would be available?
You could do that on your own, even though the school is mandated to do it for free, a complete psychoeducational eval. That sounds like a low price, which sounds like it might have been targeted at one specific area and wasn't a complete evaluation.
And maybe I'm
But
off on that price. I'm trying to remember that
because they're
conversation.
usually 2,000 or 3,000, they're right
Okay.
up there.
Okay.
And they sometimes parents will look at a psychoeducational eval done by the school and disagree. And if they disagree, then they can do their own independent educational eval, IEE, paid for by the school, but using, well, it depends on the state, I guess. I'm not sure if, I think that you're encouraged to use one of their clinicians. It has to be a clinician that they accept. The thing with that is, you can do another evaluation, but they don't have to go by it. They're mandated to look at it and look at what happened, but they don't have to go by it necessarily. I've not seen that happen. I've seen that, you use a reputable clinician and you repeat another evaluation. The school is happy to look at it and happy to incorporate it into any type of support, generally, I think. But yes, they are very expensive, and but people do it for sure, or they get the school to pay for the IEE, but then you're mandated for their clinicians, I think in some cases, maybe not in others. I'm not too sure about that. You'd have to look into where you are, if you could use your own clinician that they would approve of.
Is it something that you could walk in and say at some point, all right, you guys did your test. Well, I did one here too. And here's what it revealed. Does it carry any weight, or would they, even if you had to go down the legal road, would it even make a difference, or are you kind of wasting time and money?
It can make a difference. I think that if you use the school and they do a complete psychoeducation eval, I think they're generally good. They're generally good clinicians, unless you had concerns about that.
Yeah.
But yes, again, the school doesn't have to. They have to acknowledge it, but they don't have to follow it. And also too, I would also suggest that if you ever did that, you would make sure that the school was aware of this testing and they had the testing prior to a meeting. You never want to spring anything on the school in the meeting, and you don't want the school to spring anything on you either. So everybody needs to be prepared. Like for this upcoming IEP meeting, there would have to be acknowledgement of what needs to be discussed.
Communication is
No
key.
surprise.
Communication and transparency. And yeah,
exactly.
you got to, even if you don't agree with the school, you have to work together to some extent. But then again, many of us don't know what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. And that's where you come in as a master IEP coach and an advocate and a coach for ADHD. Karen, if parents are struggling, don't have answers, have questions for you, how can they contact you?
They could contact me through my website, KarenKLowry.com, email Karen@KarenKLowry.com. Those are probably the best places. I'm on social media as well. My private business page on Facebook is ADDadvocate. That's another place.
And just want everybody to know, Lowry spelled Lowry. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for all the insight today. Very, very interesting. Reveals a lot, and good luck with you and that family that you're working with, and looking forward next time we get together.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
I appreciate it. We'll be right back.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.